This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Welcome back to home stretch here on Inside the Paint. This show's really flown by. It's amazing how much easier it is to do these shows and how much quicker they go when the team's winning and things are looking good. So after this exam week, the Heat go 3-1. Easily could have been 4-0.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't love the way the end of that Milwaukee game played out. I was kind of on an island where I actually kind of agreed with the 2-minute report. I didn't think there should have been a foul called on Giannis. I thought that was two guys going for the ball. And I don't like that we're seeing some of this weird stuff happen late in games. And yet at the same time, you could say, okay, Kyle Lowry didn't play.
Yes.
And unless and until we get to the point where there's that moment of truth against a really good team with Kyle Lowry on the floor, and a game that, look, we talk about all the time where Jimmy Butler, he just seems to have his eyes on the playoffs, which you understand. Until you get to that point and there's a problem, then I guess it's time to just forget worrying about it, get that one seed and move forward. But based on what we saw last week and based on what we're seeing with some of the Eastern Conference contenders, how do you feel this team matches up with the Brooklyns, the Milwaukees, the Philadelphias, and I want to throw Boston into that mix now with, man, they're going on a run, and it looks like they're starting to figure out how to play together. I love the acquisition of Derek White. How do you see them stacking up, the Heat stacking up with those teams?
You know, again, it's almost like we're playing bracketology in the NBA. There's a path of least resistance. It's like I want to be shipped west because it's the easier region. So I could see a scenario where you wind up with Cleveland in the first round. And Chicago, you played very well. Chicago in the second round. So you can wait for a Milwaukee maybe or a Philadelphia until the Eastern Conference Finals. It's all about matchups. But on the other hand, if Brooklyn is in the 7-8 game and the Heat are 1 or 2, let's say 1, and Brooklyn winds up at number 8, look, I know people think I'm overstating and worrying too much, but we haven't seen the full Brooklyn yet with Durant, who was very good in that game against the Heat in Brooklyn, with Kyrie, who didn't play in that game in Brooklyn, and with Ben Simmons, who hasn't played at all. In 2 weeks, in 2 weeks from Saturday, they'll host the Nets down here at FTX Arena. All three by then, I would think, I'm assuming Ben Simmons even by then would be ready. I'll have a better read. I would not be shocked if the Heat, as the number 1 seed, we wind up with one of those very rare 1-8 upsets, and it wouldn't be an upset. As a matter of fact, Clay, let me ask you this. You know the wise guys. You hang with those guys on the corner there when you bet the number every morning. So
I know where you're going on this.
So if the Heat were to play the Nets in the first round, who do you think Vegas would favor?
Brooklyn.
Crazy,
Brooklyn.
Right? In a 1-8 scenario.
Because I think, and I think part of that, Ira, is that, you know, the wise guys' number one job, the guys who set the line, their number one job is to try to get 50% on both sides. And that's the thing where it's like everybody tries. Oh, Vegas is setting a trap. No, they don't set traps. They don't want more than 50% of the money on one side because then there's not a guaranteed win there. So I think that the wise guys would look at this and say, oh, we can't put the Heat as favorites because way too much money would come in on Brooklyn. And then if Brooklyn wins, we're toast. So I think that because of the big names there, it would be more about trying to get the 50% on each side. Now, who do I think would win that series? I can't sit here and answer that question yet because I haven't seen that team together. I have seen the Heat. So I would probably lean towards the Heat right now as the more known quantity of those teams playing together. But if Brooklyn came down here and all those guys played together and Brooklyn won the game by 20 points, that wouldn't surprise me. I just feel like the talent level is such that if it clicks in Brooklyn, it's over. But I don't know that it is going to click because there's been no evidence yet to suggest that that's a slam dunk. They have the best player, for sure. I mean, Kevin Durant is the best player in the world. But is it all going to come together in a way where the sum of the parts is going to be as much as, you know, I always screw up that thing, but you know,
I understand that. But if you do the matchups, Kevin Durant is better than Bam Adebayo, and I don't think Bam Adebayo would be offended by hearing someone say that. Kyrie Irving is better than a 35-year-old Kyle Lowry. I don't think Kyle might be, but I think that's a reasonable supposition. So then you have Jimmy Butler better than Ben Simmons, and still the Nets take it there. I want to fill people in again. If you're at home and you have some scratch paper, you can write this down. The top 6 seeds in the Eastern Conference automatically advance to the playoffs. So Clay, jump in anytime if you disagree. So from the top 6, we're probably looking at Miami, in some order, Miami, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Chicago. I would put Boston there, and then probably either Cleveland or Toronto. For argument's sake, after Cleveland won last night, let's put Cleveland there. At that point, number 7 plays number 8. Number 7 hosts number 8 in a one-game playoff. The winner gets number 7. So if I'm the Heat at number 1, okay, I'm going to give the Heat the number 1 seed. Congratulations, Eric Spoelstra. Another banner going up for you. The winner of the 7-8 game is out of the Heat bracket. In that case, if Toronto, for argument's sake, is playing Brooklyn, I would be, if I'm the Heat, I'd root for Brooklyn. Brooklyn goes to number 7. They play Philadelphia, Milwaukee. Couldn't give a crap. Yes, Toronto will be drag out, knockdown fight. It always is. But Nick Nurse has been playing his players 49 minutes a game. They might be a little bit tired come then. Okay, let's take the scenario a little further. 7-8 game. Let's say Toronto wins because they're home court, because Nick Nurse is a damn good coach. Then the loser of the 7-8 game sits and waits. The number 9 and number 10 teams play. For argument's sake right now, let's say Atlanta hosts Charlotte. As much as Charlotte with Gordon Hayward back is a different team, they always lose. So Atlanta winds up winning that game in the number 9-10. They then play the Nets if the Nets would have lost to Toronto for the number 8 seed. So again, if you're the Heat, you could root against the Nets and say, come on, Trae Young, drop a 50-burger on them. We'd rather play Atlanta. The Heat have been very good against Atlanta this season, not like last year when it was a little more uneven. So the play-in round is going to be freaking huge for the Heat. And that's the nice thing, that if the Heat wind up as the number 1 seed, Clay, we will have a ton of interest in the play-in round. First, in the 7-8 game, whoever wins, okay, that's out of the Heat's bracket, don't have to worry about it, or maybe you're hurt. Then a strong enough 9 or 10 team to maybe knock out who's left playing for the number 8 seed. The Heat's interest will go through that Thursday of that week. And someone asked me this at AskIra@SunSentinel.com, and they said, isn't it a huge advantage for the Heat not to be in the play-in round? And of course it is. Your last game is April 10th in Orlando. Might not even have meaning. Might even give your guys that day off anyway. You don't start the playoffs until the earliest at April 16th on that Saturday. So you have time to get ready for that series also. But you know, coaches, Eric Spoelstra, we don't know our opponent. We can't game plan. We're just sitting here. He'll treat it like the worst thing in the world. Before the playoffs, we've only had 36 hours to prepare for our playoff opponent. This isn't fair. This shouldn't be for the number 1 seed. It's going to be a fascinating week. Even though the Heat's regular season ends on April 10th, the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th will be really interesting days for the Heat season as well, unless the Heat drops to 3. If they drop to 3, they know they're probably going to wind up with Cleveland or with Boston. And like you said, to your point, Boston's playing really well now. That's another bad matchup for the Heat, if you were to ask me.
And here's a flip side of that with having to, wait so long and not know who you're going to game plan for. You have enough time to come up with contingencies. And the Heat have enough really smart people working for them that work really hard to where they're going to be able to come up with these contingencies if it's going to be a Toronto, if it's going to be a Brooklyn. So based on what you've said, Ira, I think this is what you hope for if you're a Heat fan. Hope for the Nets to win some games to where they either finish in the 6 or the 7. Like, you want them, because then you're not facing them until the Eastern Conference Finals.
If
right?
they win the 7-8 game. If they lose the 7-8 game, then you're rooting against them and hoping an Atlanta emerges from the 9-10 that maybe knocks them out of the playoffs. I think our swing team right here, Clay, is Cleveland. I think they've been teetering. I think Cleveland is what I referred to early in the year as a glad to be here team. I love to play glad to be here teams in the playoffs. Hey, we're in the playoffs. Our season's over. Yay! I think that's where Cleveland is. No one expected them to be alive this long as an elite seed. So you could make an argument that's another reason why the Heat's Friday game against Cleveland is a bigger one. Push them out of the way. Let the Nets slide up there. Let someone else deal with them. I agree with that also. So it's going to be interesting. I think Cleveland is the swing team in the East. They were tied for first for a while. They were number 2 for a while and number 3. Jared Allen now with the thumb injury. And so now you wonder if they could be the same team or not. I think they could fall to the play-in. I also think Cleveland is worried about possibly falling into the play-in.
And there are a couple of comments here that I agree with, by the way. Cidola and the greater good about it. Nets have questionable chemistry. I agree with that because it's questionable because we haven't seen it. I mean, we haven't seen those guys out there together with the Ben Simmons. because I think, look, if Ben Simmons weren't a part of this equation, I think the Heat would have enough to where they would outscore.
Did
I'd
you
be
see
okay.
Kyrie last night?
I saw him last night, but I also, you can't. There's only one basketball. And I feel like, man, you're going to be able to come up with something to where, I'm not saying it'd be a slam dunk, but I would feel confident that the Heat could win that series. But here's what these guys are bringing up, and I agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just dismiss the Bucks. I still feel like Milwaukee is the other. If you remove the Heat from the equation, the Bucks are the team that would scare me the most, even more than Brooklyn, for this reason. We saw it against Phoenix the other day, and we saw it in the game between the Heat and the Bucks. The Bucks' big three, if you want to call Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton number 2 and 3 of those big three, they're two of the rare guys in the NBA who elevate their play at crunch time in big moments. They're better.
They know how to win. Those players, the Bucks, after winning a championship, they know how to win. We don't know if James Harden knows how to win. Yes. We don't know if Ben Simmons knows how to win. We don't know if Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso and Zach LaVine even DeMar DeRozan to a degree know how to win. So I agree. For Milwaukee, there's not a situation in the playoffs that they can't reference back to and saying, okay, this happened before last year. It happened to us against Brooklyn. It happened to us against Atlanta. It happened to us against Phoenix. We've seen it before. I agree. I would say the most dangerous threat to the Miami Heat in the Eastern Conference, because it's a known threat, would be the Milwaukee Bucks. I agree, Clay.
Yeah, so I feel like I've said this for 3 or 4 years now, and I think it's still Drew Holiday is the most underrated player in the NBA, and it's not close. And I feel like
Chris Middleton might be the most underrated player.
Say again?
I think Chris Middleton might be the most underrated player.
And there you go. I mean, and that's the point here. It's that Giannis is going to run the race. Giannis is going to put up ridiculous numbers against every team except by the way, I think the Heat have a good plan for slowing down Giannis. And I think you even saw it in the playoffs last year against the Bucks, where Giannis had some numbers, but his shooting percentage was bad. Like, they have a plan that works against Giannis. Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton just do stuff that you can't plan for if you're going to throw everything at Giannis, as you should. Giannis is their best player. Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton are their most clutch players, and they're the guys who get you across the finish line. And that's what scares me about playing Milwaukee. It's that you can do everything right against Giannis and slow him down, and you can have a 10, 12-point lead in the fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden, Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton do what they did against Phoenix the other day, which was, we're not losing this game. We are not losing a nationally televised game to a Phoenix team without Devin Booker and Chris Paul. We are going to make sure we win this game. And, I mean, they did it against Miami last week, too, although Giannis made some plays down the stretch as well. It's Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton scare the daylights out of me when you get into those situations. So it's not that Brooklyn is the biggest threat to the Heat. It's that when you're talking about the first round or even having to play them in the conference semifinals, you don't want to have to play Brooklyn, and then if you find a way to beat them, then have to play Milwaukee in the conference finals. I still think Milwaukee is the biggest threat, but Brooklyn is close enough to where you don't want any part of them at all unless you get to the conference.
I mean, Clay, imagine a path of Brooklyn in the first round, Philadelphia in the second round, and Milwaukee in the third round. This is like the old days of the Western Conference when they were cannibalizing each other, so you'd come out of there exhausted. There are just divergent paths. We are going to be standings watching so much beyond the Heat come the final 2 weeks of the season. I don't know how much the Heat can directly impact, but they do have games against Boston and Chicago and Toronto. The final 2 weeks of the season, they might be able to maneuver. They'll never tell you that, but they could impact their own fate, and they should. And you should set up your best path. It's almost like if we got back to the way they do it in the G League at one time, where you drafted your playoff opponent. Believe me, if they were to pull names out of a hat or preference opponents, it wouldn't be the Nets, it wouldn't be the Sixers, it wouldn't be the Bucks. But that's not how it plays, and it's going to be so random and so tiebreaker-oriented, just like last year. One more win, and the Heat played the Hawks or the Knicks in the first round. Believe me, life would have been a lot different than a first-round sweep, against the Bucks. So it does matter who you play. Different horses for different courses.
Celtics or Sixers? Which one scares you more?
I'd say Celtics, they've been together longer. Jason Tatum scares me in a playoff series more than James Harden's playoff past. And I think the Heat can do enough against Joel Embiid with Bam and with Dwayne Dedmon.
And by the way, you mentioned last week that the Philadelphia game was really big for Bam because he had to show that he could go out there defensively against Embiid. And it was almost like Bam knew that because his offense, he seemed to direct a lot more of his energy towards it, and it worked. Bringing it full circle as we wrap up the show tonight, Heat take on the Phoenix Suns. Latest word is that Devin Booker is expected to play in this game tonight. He's already in South Florida, should be out of health and safety protocols. How do you see this one playing out, 30 seconds or less?
I think the Heat still like to make statements. And the fact is they had a day off yesterday. You're getting a team on the second night of a back-to-back. There are no excuses. You had Houston on the second night of a back-to-back, took care of business. You had Philly on the second night of back-to-back, took care of business. Fatigue does matter. The Heat should be up for this. It's all trending in the right way. Kyle Lowry's back. Victor Oladipo is back. You're pretty well whole except for Markieff Morris. Keep making the statements. If you're your best tonight, the Heat should have more than enough. We shall see. It's kind of nice just to get the national television, even though I'll be over there with Eric Reed and John Crotty.
Great stuff. And thanks to you guys for listening and watching. You guys helped this show fly by today. It's been a blast. We'll join you again right here on Inside the Paint.
Oladipo. Thank you.
Oh, the Big O Show rolls on next.